When we think about pop stars today, it's basically an arms race for volume,
Oh, totally.
right? Like
Yeah.
we picture the pyrotechnics, the stadium tours, those massive subwoofers. It really feels like you just have to scream to be heard over the baseline noise of the industry.
It is a cultural competition of who can be the loudest. I mean,
It's
without a doubt. And if you look at the history of entertainment,
Yeah.
it is almost always operated on that exact logic. Bigger, brighter, louder.
But today, we're diving into a forgotten 1920s superstar who just totally flipped that logic on its head.
Yeah, he really did.
We're going to look at a guy who conquered the absolute loudest decade in modern history, not with a scream, but with a whisper.
It's such a great contrast.
It really is. So for you listening, we're doing a deep dive into the life of a man named Whispering Jack Smith. And we're using his journey to look at how a devastating personal trauma can actually accidentally birth a revolutionary pop culture aesthetic.
Right. And honestly, what his story reveals about the completely brutal economy of fame, it's an incredible narrative to dig into, especially when you realize the sheer scale of his success.
Yeah, contrasted with how quickly the industry just moved past him. Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. Because before he was Whispering Jack Smith, this international sensation, he was just a kid from the Bronx.
Exactly. Jacob Schmidt.
Right, Jacob Schmidt, born May 30th, 1896. And to really grasp what he accomplished and what he ultimately lost, we have to look at his starting point.
And we get a wonderfully grounded look at who this young man was right before the world fundamentally changed for him. There's this World War I draft registration card.
Oh, yeah, the draft card.
Yeah, dated June 5th, 1917. He fills it out at a precinct in the Bronx. He's 21 years old, and he signs it Jack Schmidt.
And the physical description on that card is just so vivid. The registrar marks him down as tall with a medium build, blue eyes, and brown hair.
It paints a picture of a young, healthy guy, right?
Exactly. Ready to take on the world. And under occupational details, he lists theatrical singer, is working for the McLaughlin Agency out of Pittsburgh, and for his location of employment, he literally just writes traveling in theaters.
Which is a fascinating detail. It tells us exactly the kind of grind he was on. I mean, at 21, he is a working, traveling vaudeville baritone.
Right, and this is pre-microphone.
Yes, pre-amplification entirely. He is standing on these wooden stages in packed, noisy theaters, projecting his voice to the very back row. That requires immense physical stamina.
And immense lung capacity.
Exactly. It's pure physical exertion.
And here is the detail on that draft card that just, honestly, it stopped me in my tracks. Under dependents, he lists exactly one person, his mother, Anna.
Wow.
So you have a 21-year-old guy, single, traveling the country, singing in these vaudeville houses, and he is the sole financial support for his mom back in New York.
That is a lot of pressure.
Right. Oh, and the registrar also explicitly checks no to the question of visible scars and notes that he has absolutely no physical disabilities.
It is a haunting document to read when you know the timeline.
It really is.
It's a snapshot of a healthy, ambitious kid whose entire livelihood is tied to his physical ability to project sound. Because the turning point of Jacob Schmidt's entire existence happens shortly after he signs that card.
He gets drafted.
He is sent overseas to fight in World War I, and during his service, a gas shell explodes right near him.
And the immediate physical result of that explosion is permanent catastrophic damage to his lungs.
Which fundamentally alters his trajectory. I mean, a gas attack in those trenches didn't just cause superficial burns, it scorched the respiratory system. It literally destroyed the lung tissue.
I really want to sit with the mechanics of that injury for a second, because we often hear damaged lungs and just think of, like, a cough.
Right, a bad cough.
But for a theatrical singer, your diaphragm and your lung capacity, they're your engine.
Yeah.
To hit the back of a vaudeville theater, you are pushing massive amounts of air across your vocal cords to create resonance in your chest and head.
And when that gas shell went off, his engine was permanently destroyed.
It's like a visual artist losing their eyesight, and forcing them to paint entirely in shadows, like a heavyweight boxer losing their punching power and having to completely reinvent themselves just to stay in the ring. How does a stage singer even survive when the physical instrument of their trade is broken?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the human instinct for survival often bypasses our limitations. It forces us to create something completely unprecedented.
He didn't quit.
No, he didn't. He was forced to develop a new style, which the historical record describes as a half-singing, half-talking delivery.
Wow.
And I think it is crucial for you, listening to this deep dive, to realize that this wasn't some clever marketing gimmick concocted in a boardroom. It was a strict physical necessity.
Because he literally couldn't belt it out anymore.
He simply did not have the breath support to belt out a song. He had to figure out how to be compelling without volume.
Right. If you can't push the sound out to the audience, you have to figure out a way to draw the audience into you. He had to compensate for the total lack of power with an absolute abundance of intimacy.
And in doing so, he essentially created the mechanical blueprint for what we now recognize as modern microphone crooning.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
He was using the texture of his vocal cords rather than the sheer air pressure from his lungs.
So he comes back from the war, and the vaudeville world, which still absolutely demands volume, is now a completely hostile environment for him. Like, he can't physically do the job he left behind.
No, he can't.
He has to find a back door to stay in the industry, which perfectly explains why he ends up taking a job in 1918 as a song plugger for the Irving Berlin Music Publishing Company.
It is the ultimate hustle. Instead of standing on a stage trying to reach 1,000 people, he is sitting at a piano in a publisher's office, hammering out the newest sheet music all day long for passing performers.
It's grueling.
Grueling, unglamorous work. But it kept his hands on the keys and his ear in the industry.
And more importantly, it allowed him to sit down and play in a smaller room where his damaged voice could actually be heard without him having to shout. He is substituting volume with musicality and sheer charm. And that basically sets the stage for a massive stroke of luck. He eventually transitions to working as a pianist at a radio station, and one day, the scheduled singer for a live broadcast just fails to show up.
It's the quintessential showbiz break, right?
Right.
The star is missing, the airwaves are dead, and the piano player has to step up to the microphone.
He steps up, and this is the moment where his trauma-induced survival mechanism collides with the exact technological innovation required to make it shine.
The microphone.
The microphone. By 1925, he's making records, and by 1926 and 1927, he is at the absolute zenith of the industry. He has these massive chart-topping hits with songs like Give Me a Little Kiss, Will Ya, Huh? And his defining signature tune, Me and My Shadow.
And the critical reception was phenomenal. I mean, contemporary reviewers were completely captivated by him. They described his style as the epitome of understatement.
The epitome of understatement. I love that.
Yeah, they praised his disarmingly intimate, polite, and velvety smooth delivery. And they explicitly noted that this quietness distinguished him from literally everyone else in the business. Wow.
Another reviewer pointed out his pleasing stage presence and a genial manner, noting how quickly he established contact with his audience.
The epitome of understatement. That phrase really strikes me, especially when you contextualize it, because we are talking about the mid to late 1920s.
The Roaring Twenties.
The Roaring Twenties. This is a cultural moment defined by frantic energy. You have massive brass bands, the explosion of jazz, the Charleston, loud, unamplified vaudeville. It is an era of pure, unfiltered noise.
Very true.
So to have a guy whose defining characteristic is understatement come in and dominate the charts, it almost feels like a paradox. How does a whisper cut through the loudest decade in modern history?
Well, that paradox is exactly why his story is so important to the evolution of media. You have to look at what early radio was doing to the architecture of society at that exact moment.
Okay.
Before radio, entertainment was almost exclusively a communal, public, and loud experience. You sat in a room with hundreds of strangers, and the performer had to project sound across a physical distance. The performer was talking to a crowd, not to an individual.
Exactly. But radio brought the performer directly into the private sanctuary of the home. It was happening right in your living room.
Oh, wow, right.
If someone is standing in your living room, you don't want them belting at the top of their lungs like they're trying to reach the balcony. You want them speaking directly to you. The technology of the microphone and the radio receiver allowed Jack Smith to completely bypass the crowd and whisper right into the listener's ear.
So he weaponized the microphone before most of the industry even understood what it was actually for.
He really did.
Because most singers at that time treated the microphone like it was just a mechanical megaphone. They still yelled into it. Jack Smith realized it was a tool for closeness.
And his damaged lungs meant he literally had to lean in close to the mic just to register a signal.
Right. And the result was this velvety conversational tone that made millions of people feel like he was sitting right next to them.
He proved that intimacy was just as marketable as spectacle. The very injury that ruined his theatrical career made him the absolute perfect pioneer for the radio age.
He essentially invents a new paradigm.
Yeah.
But as we established in the beginning of this deep dive, we have to look at the brutal nature of showbiz fame.
We do.
And this is where the story shifts from a triumphant underdog narrative to a very dark commentary on how the entertainment machine operates. So Jack Smith proves this intimate formula works. He is an international name.
Huge name.
In 1927, he takes this uniquely American, intimate style across the Atlantic. He tours England with the Blue Skies Theatre Company, performing the Great American Songbook, tunes by Gershwin and Rogers and Hart's Manhattan. He is the toast of London.
He's at the absolute peak of his global reach.
And then the floor just falls out.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of this massive success in the UK, he is abruptly replaced.
Just like
He's swapped out on the tour for a new all-girl singing trio called the Hamilton Sisters and Fordyce. The machinery of the industry decides they've squeezed enough juice out of him for that tour, and they just plug in a shiny new act.
it is a harsh reality check. The moment you prove a new aesthetic is viable, the industry no longer needs you specifically. They just need the aesthetic.
And that leads to the cruelest part of this entire story. Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit infuriating.
Yeah, this part is tough.
The replacement on the tour was bad enough, but then we have the emergence of a man named Chester Gaylord.
Ah, yes. Billed as the Whispering Serenader.
The Whispering Serenader. I mean, just listen to this. There's a 1929 review from the Western Mail in Australia that lays the whole situation out with terrifying clarity.
What did they say?
The reviewer states that Chester Gaylord began entirely as an imitator of Jack Smith, rivaled him for public favor in just a few months, and finally dethroned him. The reviewer even twists the knife by praising Gaylord's records as being more attractive in melody and treatment than Smith's original work.
It is the ultimate commodification of a human being's trauma.
It is. If you look at the irony here, it is absolutely staggering. Jack Smith did not invent this whispering style as a clever branding exercise. He didn't sit in a room and say, it would be a cool vibe.
Right.
He created it because his body was physically destroyed in a war zone. He survived a gas shell explosion, rebuilt his entire life and technique around his broken lungs, and clawed his way to the top.
And the industry just looks at his literal survival mechanism, realizes it moves units, and says, great aesthetic, we'll take it.
Exactly, which highlights a very uncomfortable truth about the economy of fame, and really the economy of innovation. The market doesn't reward the person who bleeds for the innovation. It rewards the person who can scale it without the baggage.
That is so true.
Once Smith proved that intimacy could be mass-produced and sold via radio, the style ceased to be his personal survival mechanism. It became a genre.
And in a genre anyone can play. Gaylord came in, adopted the style without the physical limitations that forced its creation, and the audience, fickle as ever, just moved on to the newer version.
They stole his shadow, which is tragically poetic given his biggest hit was literally me and my shadow. He paved the road with his own broken health and someone else drove the parade right over it.
So where does that leave Jacob Schmidt? Once the industry decides they prefer the imitation to the authentic trauma, what does the rest of his life look like?
Well, he relies on the one trait that never left him, his hustle. He returns to New York and goes to work for NBC Radio. He stays in the game. He's no longer the king of the industry, but he doesn't just fade into complete obscurity either. He made occasional film appearances, and he even managed to mount a brief comeback in the late 1940s.
And he just kept grinding. But that second act didn't last long, did it?
No, unfortunately.
Jack Smith died in New York City of a heart attack on May 13th, 1950. He was only 53 years old. He was survived by his wife, Marie. 53 is incredibly young. But when you consider the profound stress his cardiovascular and respiratory systems had been under since that gas attack in 1917, it's perhaps not entirely surprising that his heart gave out early.
And this brings us to what might be the most heartbreaking, full-circle detail of his life. The final resting place of the man who topped the charts, who pioneered the intimacy of modern radio, who toured the world and changed the way we interact with microphones.
Yeah.
He is buried in St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx, and he is buried right next to his mother, Anna Schmidt.
The very same woman he listed as his sole dependent on that draft card when he was 21 years old.
Exactly. Before the war, before the gas shell, before the fame and the betrayal, he ends up right back where he started, taking care of his mom. But here's the kicker. Despite his legacy, despite the records and the tours, his grave is completely unmarked.
It's unbelievable.
He's just in the dirt, unacknowledged.
An unmarked grave for a man whose voice was intimately broadcast into millions of homes across the globe. The contrast is incredibly jarring, and it really speaks to how ruthlessly efficient the pop culture machine is at discarding its pioneers.
It feels like the ultimate erasure.
Yes.
They took his voice, they took his aesthetic, and then they didn't even leave him a stone.
It does feel that way. However, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that history, eventually, has a way of trying to correct these profound oversights.
Okay, how so?
Well, the immediate industry, the record labels, the touring companies, they might have forgotten him the second the money dried up. But human curiosity is far more enduring than corporate memory. Archivists and historians eventually went looking for the origins of this style.
Right, the actual music and the impact didn't just evaporate.
Exactly, the historical record fought back. In 1995, Pavilion Records went back into the archives and released a retrospective CD simply titled Whispering Jack Smith.
Oh, nice.
And then 5 years later, in 2000, ASV released another compilation of his later acoustic and early electric songs, fittingly titled Me and My Shadow.
And it didn't stop at just preserving the audio either. I was looking at the publication history, and perhaps most significantly, in February 2014, Tate Publishing released a massive, exhaustive biography entitled Whispering Jack and Peggy O.
And that is not a casual pamphlet.
No, it is a 488-page book. It meticulously covers the timeline from just before the end of World War I all the way to his death. And it even includes historical pictures pulled from Smith's own home movies. It is a monumental act of historical reclamation.
Which proves that an unmarked grave in 1950 is not the final word. The pop culture machine is designed to consume and discard, but the desire to find the truth behind the art, to understand the actual human cost of innovation, it eventually brings the true pioneers back into the light.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to us right now? Why should we care about the turbulent, often unfair life of a 1920s baritone who lost his voice?
Good question.
I think Jack Smith's journey is the ultimate testament to the unexpected power of our own limitations. We spend so much of our lives trying to hide our injuries, our traumas, the things that we feel break us, because society tells us those things disqualify us from success.
Right, we're supposed to hide the flaws.
But Jacob Schmidt couldn't hide his broken lungs. He literally couldn't breathe the same way anymore. He had to use his limitation. And by forcing himself to work within those severe, unfair boundaries, he accidentally invented a completely unique strength that changed the entire architecture of his industry. Your greatest limitation might just be the exact boundary that forces your most brilliant innovation.
I couldn't agree more, and that brings up a really vital lens through which to view the world. It leaves me with one final thought I want you to mull over after you finish listening to this deep dive.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Think about the media you consume today. The music, the films, the apps on your phone, the technology you rely on. How many of the dominant artistic styles or technological innovations that we currently take for granted, things we assume were born out of pure, unadulterated genius, were actually born out of someone desperately trying to work around a profound physical limitation or a catastrophic failure?
Wow, he really makes you look at every piece of polished entertainment differently, wondering where the hidden scars are. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the stories behind the history you think you know, because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do isn't to turn the volume knob all the way up and scream louder than everyone else. Sometimes it's to force the world to lean in and listen to your whisper.